Hi YouTubers. I wanted to just give an update on my latest thoughts about the whole situation concerning the fears over the viral outbreak that's being referred to as COVID-19, I think. But at the beginning it was referred to as coronavirus. That sort of led to some confusion because there's a family of viruses called corona, and that happens to be just one strain of those, apparently. Um, and that explains, I suppose, why there are references to coronavirus in episodes of The Simpsons from years ago, in various novels, and I think there's various programs. There was, I think it was a Chinese program, may have been Korean, actually, I'm not sure, and it referred to, it was a hospital documentary that referred to corona patients, but that was some years ago. But coronaviruses have been apparently studied for some years. So this latest one is a new strain, but of an old type of virus, apparently. But it's not something I've studied a lot about. I suppose it's really an unprecedented situation. 1/3 of the world's population at the moment have been under this shutdown, where governments around the world have forced various businesses to close down, schools, pubs, restaurants, cafes, large crowds, even small crowds banned from meeting up with each other. Yesterday I went out to a park and was sat down on a park bench. The police approached me and they asked me to move on. Wasn't doing anything, I was just sat down. They said because the latest government information is that people can only go out to exercise. And I happily complied with them. And, I didn't want to argue. I think there was some talk of a fine, perhaps if I didn't comply. But, I'm willing to comply with an order so long as it doesn't contradict any moral beliefs that I hold. And I had no problem with continuing my exercise and having a wander around town and then going home a little later. That was fine. And I can understand their reasoning if they really do believe that there's a serious threat of the spread of viruses and that there is a genuine risk of this. Then I suppose if they allow one or two people to sort of sit there idly on park benches, then it could invite perhaps hundreds or perhaps even thousands to congregate. And I can see that. But at the same time, I also kind of rationalised and thought, well, I know me being sat alone in an area where I'm not surrounded by anyone, whether that's at home alone on a couch or whether that's out in a park on a park bench, I know that couldn't be any risk to anyone at all, actually. And I am actually quite wary of some of these pieces of advice that are being given out to some people, saying that you mustn't go out the house at all. I just find that ridiculous, just because, one, we need to keep active physically, but I think also mentally, to keep ourselves both physically and mentally fit. And I think all doctors would agree with that, to be honest with you. And I think that's why, having daily exercises is always recommended, but especially so for many conditions, in actual fact. I know that if I become lethargic and inactive too long, and I'm not doing my proper exercises, it's harder, because actually the exercises for me, it really helps me clearing out mucus. And in actual fact, when you're exercising, the brain, in fact, is producing endorphins, which is why you can feel an adrenaline rush and really positive after a real workout. So it's really vital that people are allowed to keep up regular exercises. And I think the current advice, at least, is that people are allowed to go out and exercise. And so if you're out walking or jogging and wandering about, if you're relatively safe distance from anyone anyway, then it's then there aren't any risks, are there, really, when you think about it? But there's no more risks than if you sat down on a park bench or just sat down on a field. So long as, if you're a safe distance from anyone, stands to reason, that's... I suppose if you really thought it was a pandemic that was super infectious, there could be some risks if you are standing close to someone in close proximity for a long length of time. So I can see hence why they've got all the advice on the spacing at the queues. So it has made the queues quite longer, they're quite stretched. You can see people standing outside the shops, and I can see as a precaution why that might be. And if it is that, then I suppose that could be an effective method to help reduce the potential risks of that. But I sort of say if it's that, because to be quite honest with you, I still do have my doubts about it. And I actually, I suppose I'm sort of on the fence and agnostic. I suppose my position at the moment is I do suspect, and I have done from the start, to be honest, that it's a gross overreaction, and it's either done on purpose for various reasons, and I'm not sure what they might be, but I'll go on in a moment to explain my thoughts on what some of those might be, at least. But I don't know, because I'm not inside other people's minds, and I don't know their intent, and I'm not privy to their private consultations either. But people can still speculate. But I do want to, before I do that, I want to sort of begin by saying the reasons why I have some suspicions. But I have to frame it very carefully and say that I don't really know, and I don't have any evidence. But I also don't have evidence to say that this is a genuine pandemic. I also don't have absolute evidence to say that it's not. Hence why I'm agnostic about it in this situation at the moment. Well, now, people would say, some people at least would be quite shocked to say, why on earth do you have any doubts at all to begin with? And I feel it's necessary, therefore, for me to explain and give some justification as to why I do feel that. And I think it's not just for other people's benefit, but for my own. It's nice for me to sort of like put down a record and to explore more what my thoughts and reasonings are for that. I would say that, generally speaking, through personal experience, I have come to a place in my life where I tend not to assume that people are necessarily speaking the truth anyway. I suppose I've been at an age where I've been deceived too many times. I've had someone who presented themselves as a guardian, as a moralist, as a preacher, as someone who was sacrosanct, a pastor, no doubt, and an active member of a church who was working with youths. And I fell for the whole story, and in actual fact it turned out that he was using that position merely to take advantage of others, to an abuse of that position, and it was really just a way to sexually and psychologically assault and abuse teenagers. That's just one example, but what I'm saying is that people do go to extraordinary lengths to lie and deceive and to get things for their own opportunity. I've met many people that have told all sorts of crazy lies over the years. I remember an instance many years ago. I was at a prayer group, and a woman there reported some family tragedies. There were such a conveyor belt of tragedies, in fact. Countless members of her family had died over a long period of time. And in actual fact, her parents that had allegedly died in a car crash were later seen walking through a Morrison's supermarket by a member of the prayer group who happened to recognise them. And they had allegedly been blown up in a car crash some months earlier. So there we go. It wasn't the dead walking and shopping. It turned out that she had been telling a pack of lies, in fact. And then the whole reasoning for that was that she just wanted to get attention. She had some sort of mental illness where she was sort of attention seeking, and people were absolutely baffled. They were totally shocked. Nobody thought that somebody would lie about that and be so extraordinarily emotionally manipulative and lie. And the rest of the group, of course, disowned her after that. I think some of them, a limited number, sort of became friends and sort of continued to pray for her and saw that she had some sort of serious deranged mental health disorder, and she needed help and support to come to terms with her deception. But in any case, that's just another example. I've come across so many cases over the years of many people, for various reasons, whether they do it deliberately or they have some disorder, people that lie and deceive and go to extraordinary lengths to do that. So I've met and witnessed people on a personal level, And you know, I've come across situations. I'll give you another example, where someone has exaggerated someone else's involvement to implicate someone in a crime. You know, where someone has made false allegations saying, "Oh, so and so down the road, they've done these awful things to my friend." And you know, I've known people that have been assaulted, and seriously assaulted, based on those false allegations. You know, so I do know that there are so much deception and corrupt practices. So, you know, when you've personally experienced and witnessed and seen the effects of such things over so many years, I suppose it kind of leads you to a position where you're more agnostic. Now, I don't want to become cynical, where I assume everyone is frauding each other, everyone is a liar. You know, that would be equally wrong as being too naive, where you assume everyone is being honest and always telling the truth. So I've come to a position of thinking the most scientific, accurate position to take when you don't know someone to begin with is to assume you don't know them. You don't know, you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know the truthfulness about this situation or these people. That's what agnostic basically means. It means not knowingness. It means I don't know the situation. I don't have access to enough relevant facts. And when you really think about it, you know, someone that is a stranger in that, you know, you don't really know how sincere they are to begin with. People can be incredibly good actors, extraordinarily manipulative and cunning. You know, some people are so apt at psychological methods where they are able to manipulate people without them realizing it. You know, they can be professional liars, where they actually spent so many years learning and crafting their skill to do this to people. Having said that, many people could appear as being deceptive. Situations can appear like that when they're not. And I know that happened to me a few years ago, where I was suspected of a serious crime myself, and it looked bad. I had drunk too much and I had left the gas on in a house, and it was through negligence, in fact. It was my fault, but it certainly wasn't something I did with intent or on purpose. But because I had shouted at this person and got angry at them sometimes, they then thought that maybe I had done it on purpose and had really wanted to kill them and murder them. You know, obviously I knew in my heart, never had done that, and I never would make a serious attempt to do that. It was just a careless, stupid mistake. But this person then became really suspicious of me. You know, I confessed to them and said, I'm so sorry, I was drunk, it was stupid. But they then thought, because they had a long-term illness, they then said, oh, could he have been poisoning me all this time? You know, they then became ultra suspicious and paranoid. Well, it was an interesting case study because there was some evidence for them to be suspicious of me, you know, given the fact there was that one occasion the gas had been accidentally left on. You know, thank goodness that they had, you know, it had been smelt and turned off early enough. And I guess that at the time was a wake-up call for me to be more cautious. You know, and then there were other kind of reasons for them to suspect me, you know, based on the fact that I had shouted, I had been angry, I may have said things I didn't mean, you know, but all of that, you know, it didn't amount to any real evidence or proof that I would make any serious attempt on their life. And so I was really hurt and wounded when they went out and spreaded this false, malicious rumours about me. Thankfully, years later, they realised, you know, I made a great effort to continue caring for them, and they saw that it was a genuine accident, and that I do sometimes shout and say stupid stuff I don't mean when I'm drunk, and I think after a long time of investing energy and time and experience with me, they got to know the real me, and eventually took a long time, but then they realised that wasn't my character, that wasn't something that I would ever do. And I think that for me is partly it, that if you take the time, the experience, you invest the actual space and time and energy in getting to know someone, and that can take a long time actually. But you know, it takes we're not just talking about a few minutes or hours. It takes days, weeks, months, years even sometimes. Probably in my life, there's only a few people that I really know that well, in fact. So I really kind of look at it like that. With strangers, we are kind of agnostic. That is the most scientific point of view. With most people I meet, I'm happy to sort of listen to the story of theirs. You know, they could be pouring their heart out and telling me some great emotional story they've been through. You know, after a few hours, I might feel that they're honest and they're heartfelt and it's truthful. I might suspect that it's not. But either way, I probably wouldn't know. You know, unless I had spent an adequate enough an amount of time, if I had invested over a long period of time with them sufficiently, then I might say I've got good reasons and good grounds that I do know this person. And it's much, even then we can make mistakes. Gosh, you hear about people that have been married to someone who's hidden a double life from them for so years. You wonder if you're married to someone or have an allegedly close relationship, sharing a home or bed even, you know, how you wouldn't know that, but it does happen. It's scary, but you can live with someone and they're hiding a double life or some sort of secret from you, even if they're living in the same house, and even if you have spent so many years, time and energy with them, you kind of think, even then, there is still the chance of people being deceived. So, you know, that if you have invested all that time, that's not a guarantee of it, but it does make it more likely because you've got a lot more evidence through the experience of the time that you are with people. Okay, so that was a whole preamble to begin with, of why I tend to be agnostic in general about all situations with people. I neither assume when I meet others and they say things, however serious or not, I neither assume that it's true or that it's false. You know, I try to start off these days with a position of saying, I don't know, because that seems the most honest position. Nevertheless, as you get to know someone in the tender stages of the early beginnings, you tend to have your suspicions and think, I kind of suspect this person's probably honest with me, or I kind of have my doubts, but you sort of say, you pencil it in rather than do it by ink, in the manner that you might erase it, because you know you might be wrong. You know, we all make mistakes in our assessment sometimes, you know, and, you know, that's happened to me sometimes where I've been falsely accused. And I've also had awful and sinister thoughts about other people, suspecting them of terrible things, where it's actually turned out to be completely wrong. And I think actually the benefit of the doubt is a great thing in that respect. The benefit of the doubt, which protects innocent people from being falsely accused, but actually it's a double-edged sword, because actually it also allows some people that are guilty of crimes to present themselves as being innocent. But I kind of think, yes, as awful as that is, I think it's much better that we allow innocent people to still carry on and allowing to have their lives. If we have too low a burden of evidence for the prosecution in life, then what we do is we allow people to spread any kind of false accusation against anyone, and that allows smear campaigns, doesn't it? Defamation of character, whether that's through the written word and libel, or whether that's through slanderous spoken words. You know, it still destroys reputations, people's relationships, jobs, careers, and it really can have a profound effect on people's lives, actually. So we all need to be cautious in our own relationships, you know, how we talk about people in terms of situations where we have suspicions, but we don't have firm evidence to actually prove whether something is grounded and truthful, or whether it's a false suspicion, that things can look bad when they're not, which can also happen, of course, to any of us. And I think it's sort of always worth thinking, you know, treat others how we'd want to be treated, you know, because we can sometimes look suspicious for various reasons, even when we're not. So I think the benefit of the doubt, it's a great principle, not just in terms of law and in the legal process itself, but actually in terms of our own personal relations. But that's, you know, in terms of our relations to everyone in life, with our neighbours, with our parents, with our loved ones, with enemies, with people that we're in arguments or conflict with our neighbours, with people at work, with government, with people in business, with whatever kind of relations. We always need to consider the law. We always need to consider what is honest. We always need to consider how would I like to be treated. And I would really encourage the benefit of the doubt to be that principle. And with that being said, I really, although I have my suspicions over the current situation, I have to be cautious not making allegations against others without any firm grounding in any evidence itself. So I don't know that anyone is doing anything that corrupt, to be honest. I don't have any firm or solid evidence to prove that. So I have to say that to begin with. Nevertheless, I still do have those suspicions. So that's what I'm going to come on to now to talk about, I guess. So I suppose I'm naturally suspicious anyway of kind of not knowing strangers anyway. And just because large groups of strangers say something, that doesn't make it any more true anyway. You know, I'm not a populist and I'm not a Democrat, to be honest with you. Just because more people tend to say something, that doesn't make it true or false. But with this current situation, I suppose I'm wary. I don't necessarily trust things that governments tell me anyway. I neither assume they're truthful nor that they're false. But I don't have that position of assuming because someone's in authority that they are infallible. I don't want to idolize them and treat them like gods or anything like that. We as people are all capable of telling the truth or lying. You know, we can even sometimes pass on false information with good intent, believing it's true, but actually, you know, we can be fooled ourselves, or we can sort of make genuine mistakes ourselves. And I suppose I would say, you know, in terms of government itself, you know, if you look at, there are countless errors throughout history, you know, whether you go back thousands of years or hundreds of years, or just in the last few decades and years itself, you know, history is scattered with so many occasions when governments have knowingly spread false information. But that's true of people in general anyway. We all can do that. You know, I'm not saying the government are any worse or awful. I'm saying that we as people, that's our nature anyway. We all have the capacity to be truthful or to spread deception. We all are capable of that anyway. You know, being in a different position, it doesn't make you any more or less. But what it does mean, if you have more power, is that what you do say has more of an effect. So with more rights come more responsibilities, of course. But it doesn't mean you're any more likely to be honest or be false. In fact, you know, there's so many other occasions I could cite of governments that have spread lots of truthful information. But just to give you an example, you know, of false information, you look at the Iraq War, the dodgy dossier, you know, claims of the weapons of mass destruction that never were, you know, completely false and ungrounded, or just an excuse to go to war, really. And there were never anything like that at all. And we know, I would say I feel quite confident in saying that, and that we know that was false information. I believe also that the 9/11 thing was an inside job. I think that was done by people within America, and I don't think it was actually done necessarily by who suggested it was, Muslim extremists. I think that it was actually done as a pretext to have the Afghanistan war. I think that because it was used as then a justification for that. So that seemed like the most plausible reason for that, of course. And of course, the fact that they claimed on the insurance for that. So there was also a financial incentive. You know, we've always got to look at motive and opportunity in these things. And I would say, you know, I had reasonable suspicions about that because of the evidence of that at the time. And for me, that was because if you look at how the towers fell, it appeared to be more of a demolition job. And that is how every other tower falls within any other demolition. They all fall exactly the same. Whereas if you look at how other towers react to any kind of collateral damage caused by a plane, in actual fact, it tends to just shatter part of it, but the strong reinforced steel, the structure, the skeleton of the building itself, that tends to stand quite firm and remain quite solid, with just a limited damage that's superficial, limited to a certain area. And that's the case of sort of like countless other superstructures, you know, that have happened to many other monolithic towers in different cities. So the Twin Towers prove the exception to the rule. They're the only other towers that have fallen in that way. That's a complete unique event. Never happened to all the other towers that have been that have had fires and completely the same level of damage to it. You never see it falling in that manner. And of course, there's the building 7 next door, that building that fell and all the other ones didn't. That's another anomaly. And that's just two amongst lots. So there were lots of other anomalies. So I'm not here to talk about that specifically, but there were a number of other reasons why I suppose I had my suspicions about that in particular. But I think actually that there are so many other occasions, depending on how much you look into it. I suppose it depends how far you go back, and also depending on sort of what areas you're looking into, depending on what country you're into, or what continent you're from, of course. I think you'll find that there's a huge number of vast examples, not just from the last few years and decades, but going back historically through centuries. But actually, I think a really famous example was the Nazis, of course. I think it was the National... the Nazi Party, who famously set fire to their own parliament and then blamed it on the communists. So that was a kind of government deception at the time that happened. And a lot of the public, I think at the time, believed it, but history proved otherwise, of course. It probably would have been very difficult to say that at the time. But I'm not here to sort of defame or to sort of make governments sound awful or anything. There are lots of examples of great honesty and great endeavours where there are good policies and that protect the public and help support them. But at the same time, there are lots of examples of the fraud, of potential fraud. And I think with the 9/11 example, for me, it wasn't just the government example. It wasn't just the fact that there was possible government implications from it. The fact that they used that as the pretext for the later Afghanistan war, it wasn't just that. It was the fact that all of the newspapers and all of the TV channels have all reported the same story, and not a single one of them over the 18 or so years, not a single one of them that I have ever remembered have ever posted any doubt in the story whatsoever. And I find that strange, an extraordinary anomaly, but it's not that strange if you consider that the majority of those papers and media general are owned by a very small number of people who would decide the editorial direction of those medias. And so it would only take a small number of people to have their conclusions, like in a hierarchical pyramid, and so that their decisions would then influence all the other editors who would then be in line with whatever their limited views were. And so that would be... So you've got a few people that are influencing, the readership and the viewers of a gigantic audience, therefore. But I think online there has been a growing scepticism over the last 15, 20 years. And I think there are hundreds of millions of people around the world, in America and Europe, that all have their doubts about the genuine mainstream story of 9/11. And lots of people have their serious doubts and good reasons for that. You'll find lots of documentaries, lots of films online, lots of talks, discussions, articles and journals, a whole wealth of that. And the more you explore and look into it, you'll find a lot of good reasoning for that and a good examination of a whole catalogue of those anomalies. But you never find a single mention of that in a single newspaper, not on the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, The Sun, The Mirror, The Star, The Guardian, The Observer, The Financial Times, and a lot of and CNN, ABC, and all these other companies, or Fox or whatever. You may find it talked about and dismissed as conspiracy theorists or nuts or people that are just crazy, but you never see a really in-depth examination of the actual evidence itself, so there's no real attempt to sort of look into it objectively from a non-biased, non-partisan point of view. So is it possible that false information can be spread and spread throughout a prolific amount of different media? Absolutely, because there are many examples of that, and it goes back throughout time. You can find hundreds of different examples the further you go back and the more you look into it. In fact, I once ordered a copy of a newspaper that came out just after the Titanic sunk, and I think it was the Daily Mirror edition, and its headline said that everyone had survived and there had been no casualties whatsoever. That was the initial headline. Well, of course, we know that there were a large number of fatalities, sadly, and but it's interesting how there was an edition of a newspaper directly after that that had as its front page cover that nobody had died, but subsequently, of course, we know otherwise. So it's a bit bizarre, that, isn't it? But you'll find so many countless examples, and the point is not to say that any editors or journalists or MPs or anyone in particular is deceptive. The point is that the human nature itself, we are all capable of that deception. So it is quite possible that it could be that false information, if there is such thing in this viral spread, that it could easily be spread prolifically to great numbers of people. Because large numbers of people, hundreds of millions, believe the official line about 9/11. Muslim extremists, we need to target them in Afghanistan. We're not really there to get resources or to have political control over their area, or to try and have control and influence in the region, or because we want access to the resources of the area. There are lots of people that just think, there are that believe the contrary theory. The world's very divided. There are hundreds of millions that think one thing, hundreds of millions that think another thing. So I think you have to take ownership and responsibility of your own investigation and searching out and looking for the information yourself, whatever it be. There's all manner of reasons of why people might want to have this shutdown and use the virus as an excuse to do that. It could be that they don't want people to socialise. It could be done as an experiment. It could be done as a preparation to see how we will react to future things. Although it's talked about as it's only going to be weeks and months, it could be a yearly thing. This could be a thing that lasts years, depending on how things go. So it could be that, that they want to close. There could be the people that want to close small business down, with monopolistic opportunities. It could be that they want to scare people, or, it could be that they want to fearmonger. So, there are lots of possible motives for someone to create this fear over a false pandemic. So, there are the sort of motives, I suppose, isn't it? To sort of like have more power, have more draconian laws passed, to keep people from going out and sharing information, to cancel all fetes and fairs and festivals. These are unprecedented times. To close all pubs and restaurants and cafes. I've never heard of that done before. Except perhaps during war times or something. But, I don't know the motives or intents. I'm only speculating that those could be possibly